This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. A saying of the day, Mother Nature can defeat anything. And we're going to talk about the fires in Maui and also some floods and things like that. But first of all, I want to mention Dallas Cowboys this last weekend had a football game, exhibition game. They're usually pretty dull. And Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State, who's an Austin, Texas guy, and UT didn't even offer him a walk-on. They wouldn't let him walk on. He's first-team All-American 2 years, and he was really electrifying the other night at the Cowboy game. So I think he's probably going to make the squad. He's only 5'6", 5'7", weighs about 170 pounds. And his dad works for the Cowboys, is a scout for the Cowboys. But Deuce Vaughn put on a pretty good show for the Cowboys the other night. Last November, I went to Maui to see Texas Tech men's basketball team playing a tournament. In fact, the Maui tournament basketball, it's always on television, and all the top teams go at some point in time. And they play it in what is like a high school gym. I mean, it's hard to get a ticket. And they've got, some church group selling popcorn. And, it's just like you were in some little town in Texas and a big rival that's coming to town and they sell out. But I really enjoyed Maui. And from landing in Maui to get to where our resort was on the west side or north side, it looked like you were driving between Ruidoso and Roswell. In August when it was really dry, and that all the grass was yellow, and it's just a rocky terrain. You think, don't these people ever get any rain? And I was there for about 5 days, I guess, and really enjoyed it. The weather was good, but I really paid attention to the fire they had last week, and death tolls up over 80. And one thing I wanted to talk about today is that people have a tendency to overlook Mother Nature and disasters, and they don't anticipate that. They don't think about it. And it's usually a perfect storm, a 100-year storm or a 500-year. I've told the story about my friend Robert Brown that invested in the redfish down at Corpus, and I think he put in about $500,000. And they had a perfect storm. They had a freeze, 1 in 100-year freeze, and killed all of his fish. And so the guy that really promoted it was a meteorologist, and he came to him and said, as a 100-year freeze. And so he talked him into doing it again the next year, another $500,000, and they had another freeze. And the guy came back, and Robert jumped him about it, and the guy said, hey, look, last year was the last year of 100 years, and this year is the first year of a new 100 years. So you've gotten 2 of them out of the way. You might as well go back. But Brown didn't fall for it the next time. He wasn't going to let them raise no fool, as he used to say. Mama didn't raise no fool. If you look at the fires, though, over 80 people died, and it just devastated the town. And you had a perfect storm in that the hurricane Dora was on the verge and was on the edge, and the winds were 60 miles an hour. And so the helicopters were not dumping water, and they weren't rescuing people. They couldn't fly 60-mile-an-hour winds. And so that changed a lot of things. And it had been very dry. It had a wet season the year before, and there'd been a lot of growth of vegetation, and then goes very dry. And I know in Texas Panhandle, one thing we always look at, if there's been a real wet spring and then it gets real dry in August and maybe even July and September, that then you're subject to having some wildfires. We had wildfires within the last 10 years in the upper part of the Texas Panhandle, killed quite a few people. Skip Hollingsworth, who is a great writer for the Texas Monthly, wrote some excellent articles on it. But people get so busy in their day-to-day routine they don't pay attention to a storm, and it's never happened to them. And so it's once in 100 years or 500 years, and they don't pay attention until they're in trouble. And then it's too late to do anything about it. They were talking about the fires that when there's a fire warning, you need to get out of it, move. And I worry here in Austin that we have a lot of vegetation. It's not cleaned out. It's not burned from year to year. And you could certainly have a fire here in Austin, and we've had a few small ones. I think a lot of people don't anticipate that can really turn bad. And if you've got a car, you want to stay in it and try to get out of the area. You see a lot of cars, though, that they get stuck in traffic, and then the people get out. And, boy, when you're running, you don't have much of a chance. If you're going somewhere, they always say, don't go uphill, because if you're going uphill, the wind and the flames will catch up with you or jump ahead of you. And some of the people that got out went out into the ocean, 100 feet or 100 yards or whatever, and had some smoke problems, but they lived through it. There was a story in the Washington Post where two women in their 30s lived through it, and there was a guy 87, and he didn't make it. He was with them when that happened. The Coast Guard was there trying to pick people up, trying to get them life jackets so that they could, at least float. It's a tough situation. Anytime you're around something, a disaster, whether it's a flood, a hurricane, or a fire, know your position. You know exactly what your location is, and that if you have to call 911, you can tell them where you are, and that's very important. One other thing that, we went for about 2 years, and everybody had a mask in the car and at home and every place. A mask can help you if you're caught in a lot of smoke and everything. But if you get in the fire, a mask is going to be just like anything else. It's going to melt on you. Most people that live in hurricane areas have an emergency kit because they know you need to, you wait until it comes up and gets on you. Well, the aisles at the grocery store are full. And most people have a survival kit. And I always tell people, keep 7 days of your medicine in that survival kit, and that's important. One of the other great phenomena of Mother Nature are tornadoes, and you don't have a bunch of warning there. I've told the story before that, I was staying with my aunt and uncle one time, and a tornado was on the ground less than a mile from the house, and Aunt Lita was going to pray for it. Said, God wants to protect us, he'll protect us. Uncle Clarence was going to go down to the cellar. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm going to go down the cellar and pray with him. I'm going to pray down there where there's some little action. And she said she knew right then I was probably going to be a lawyer. The tornadoes, if you've got a cellar, you've got something, a lot of people say, why do they always hit mobile homes? Well, that's where it does the most damage. They don't always hit mobile homes. But that's, you're not going to ride one out, and make sure that when there's warnings out, you're watching the news, because they can usually tell you where the tornado is going to be, and that you're going to have to make some movement. Or if you have a mobile home park, usually they'll have a cellar at that mobile home park. Gives you a chance to avoid the tornado. One thing about disasters, just trying to stay on top of it and know that something bad's happening, and that's staying in touch with your weather stations and listening to them, and also having a battery-operated radio. And I've got one of those survival radios that you crank it. You get a problem with your arm, but at least you'll be able to know what people are saying and what may be happening. On fires, they talked about some people were trying to get in swimming pools. In a swimming pool, usually it's close to a house, and there's going to be fires all around it. The drownings, 80% of drownings happen to men. They take chances that women will not take. In USA, we have 4,000 people a year drown, and in the world, we have 250,000. 250,000 people drown every year, and so some of that's caused by floods and people trying to go through floods, and they try to go around, a barrier, and it always going to end in disaster. I know right here in Austin in Central Texas, we'll go months and have very little rain, and then it may rain 10 inches in 2 days or something. I think back to one of the recent hurricanes in Richmond, Texas, that had 54 inches of rain in 48 hours. I mean, that's just like pouring it out of a bucket, and it hard to overcome that. But if you're aware of things and you make some preparation, you're going to have a better chance than if you're just waiting to the last moment. On flash floods and everything, remember the old saying, turn around, don't drown. I mean, that's very important. But we lose a lot of people every year, 5 here, 10 there, or whatever, for drowning by driving into something they shouldn't. If you get 6 inches of water and it's pretty fast current, it'll get an automobile to floating away. If it's a foot or two, you don't have a chance at all. One thing I'd say in closing is that Maui will have a hard time coming back from this. When you have one of those resort towns just wiped out, every business is burned, and people won't have jobs. And this will be a very difficult situation. I've got a friend that's got a house and a condo in Maui, and he was about 6 miles from where it happened. And he just said that the area where it hit, Leilani, that it was just completely devastated. Every building, every house was completely burned to the ground. But it doesn't matter if you're talking about hurricanes, floods, lightning. And lightning, Florida has the most people killed by lightning, about 80 a year. In Texas, second with about 40. Open space, they don't think the lightning's going to get, it's further away, and they just kind of ignore it. But you can't ignore Mother Nature. I think the economy with the FEMA, and some people complain that FEMA didn't get in there for 3 or 4 days. FEMA's not going to find you for 2 or 3, 4 days, 5 days maybe. You got to be ready. Back when Katrina, everybody was blaming it, and my grandkids, they'd see somebody had a flat, and they said, "Everybody call FEMA." I said, "Oh, that's good. You got a good sense of humor." That you got their own responsibility, and you got to make some adjustments to be able to survive on these situations. But it's just sad to see so many people die because it was so overwhelming. In closing, you got to stay on top of the weather. Watch what's happening and anticipate what might be coming up. This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Weather's always changing. Be alert.